there's that for whatever anyone else might say about Common Core. That's going to happen.
In your comments, you said that there is no conflict between evolution and theism. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah. Or what I'd say is many people do not find a conflict.
I find that difficult to accept because evolution is based in science and theism is not. So I think if you lean toward science, you have a problem with theism to begin with. And since the majority of people in this country profess that they believe in God, they're going to get defensive about things that they perceive are conflicting with their belief system.
Yeah. I mean, I think the answer to that is just to have, I mean, there's clergy members who come out and say that they don't see a conflict, and the more who come out, the more who talk to their flocks and say, hey, this is, I mean, you can go look at the science and it shouldn't scare you better. That's really the best answer I see to that.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but I still contend there is a conflict between a science-based belief system and one that's not.
I mean, yeah, some people do think that. Carl Sagan, I think, said that they're separate spheres, and that's the easiest way. I mean, that's the way that many people can see it. So, I mean, I have to agree to disagree.
Okay, just to piggyback on that question, what is public opinion on the issue? I mean, is there polling data in existence about evolution versus creationism in schools in the state or even nationally?
There's national data. The problem with this polling is it's sort of hard. Like, it's only a rough way to look at it. So Gallup, what it says, it shows consistency in belief, although it doesn't necessarily represent a perfect picture of the beliefs of the United States. So Gallup has been doing polling on evolution for a while, and it stayed between 40 and 48% of the country believes the Earth was formed in the last 10,000 years. Now, I don't actually think that 48% of the country believes the Earth was formed in the last 10,000 years. I don't think that's true. Having said that, even if we say only 30, like I'll just completely make up a number and my statistics are totally off, but let's say 35% of the country believes in evolution. Let's say that's a more reasonable, or believes in creationism. Let's say that's a more reasonable estimate. It's still far too high. And so we're seeing, I mean, there's some polls that show about 35% of the country believes in creationism, and that may better reflect it. But but what I've been seeing from this is more that Gallup's poll shows that beliefs haven't changed, that there hasn't been that much traction in educating people about evolution over the years, and that's what I would take away from that. Someone had their hand up over here.
Well, I was referring back to what the last gentleman said about the clergymen and how they don't have anything against evolution. So where exactly is that view? Like, where does religion stop for them and evolution comes in? Like, how does that intertwine for them? I'm confused. Like, do you know exactly like their perception of view on that?
I imagine it changes for every different person. One of the most well-known sort of people who've made really he's made a career out of a lot of things, but part of his career is sort of explaining how he has his faith and has evolution, and that's Dr. Ken Miller, who wrote the Pearson biology textbook, one of the most popular textbooks, and he has a couple books on this. And so that would be where I'd suggest if people are going to go explore that, to look first. And also Dr. Francis Collins, the head of the NIH, is an evangelical who also is fairly aggressive in his defense of evolution. So maybe look there, and I'm sure with the Google search of theistic evolution, you'll find a lot more opinions on it.
I apologize for making another comment. There's this wonderful concept about the God gap, and it's about the gap between the infringement of science on theism, and it's, of course, growing as science evolves. And that's just very frightening to people who have been indoctrinated into religion, and I was one of those. I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, and an expression I like to use is I escaped. It took a long time. And, you know, if it infringes enough, then people become very frightened by, of course, death and life, because obviously religion gives us some assurance about the death process, and I hear every day as a health professional it gives them assurance about the life process. And it doesn't surprise me at all they resist evolution, because they sooner or later, that and every other scientific idea that evolves is going to ultimately destroy my faith, and that scares the hell out of me too, for lack of a better expression.
The interesting thing is, like, if you limit, I mean, talking sort of about godly gaps, where that God is sort of slowly being limited to the places where science hasn't tread yet. And it's like, that seems to be a very, sort of a small religion in a way. And I would imagine that many people think that it's like, why, like, it doesn't, I mean, the whole point of faith is that it's supernatural. And so why limit to the naturalistic places? And that, I mean, yeah, I mean,
the Christian faith in which I was reared. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's many, like, we see, creationism sort of spreading its way around the world. It's biggest in the US, but we see it in Turkey, we've seen it in Britain. There's a lot of people with a lot of different faiths who have a problem with evolution.
Going back to that question earlier about who's on the other side. On one side, you have these scientific associations and scientists and Nobel Prize laureates, and who is on the other side? I want to talk about some of these companies, maybe a certain company in Oregon and certain companies maybe in North and South Carolina that show people habitating the earth with dinosaurs in their books and everything else. And
So, do you mean the Creation Museum in Kentucky, maybe?
well, there's one of them. Those are the Discovery
Institute's in,
Discovery
in Seattle. Yeah, so in Louisiana, the big creationist group is the Family Forum, and they're the ones who sort of pass the bills on the ground. They're the local affiliate to focus on the family. And nationally, the group that drafted the Louisiana Science Education Act and sort of runs the creationist legislative policy around the country is this group called the Discovery Institute. I am currently up for their Censor of the Year award. I am censoring information about evolution. You email their editor. So it's editor@evolutionnewsandviews.com, I think. I don't know how they count votes when it just goes to an email account. That seems not like an effective. Why don't they just put a poll up?
Non-scientific.
Well, it just seems tedious too. But they're the big outfit that does all this stuff. They were the ones who created intelligent design, and so they have this thing they call the wedge strategy, and they view intelligent design as sort of a wedge into material science that they can sort of break down all of science with once they sneak creationism and intelligent design into schools. And it's a weird idea. It's like, why does science, the definition of science is that it's naturalistic. It doesn't ever claim to be more than naturalistic. And so this is this whole point to like break down naturalistic science. And they're the group who sort of have been running that. And then you've got groups like the Creation Museum, which I think I might speculate are a little bit less about the creationism and more about making money. Yeah. They used to do that fairly well. I think they've been struggling recently, and it's not the end of the world.
Going back to your comments about the NGSS, the next generation science standards are really a fairly radical re-envisioning of science education in the United States. It's a K through 12 integrated science program that's really going to require us to do a lot of re-education of teachers who are out there and change the way we address preparing teachers to teach this curriculum going into the future. How do we galvanize ourselves to get our legislators to also invest in that teacher preparation that's going to be necessary to carry Common Core and NGSS forward?
That is a very, very hard question to get the legislators to do that. So if you get me started on funding, it's like we are struggling in this state. We've been cutting all of higher ed, we've been cutting all of hospitals, we've been cutting everything. I don't know exactly how we get Bobby Jindal in the legislature to give more money. Things like we've squandered the entire budget. Having said that, I mean, ideally we get a legislator to introduce a bill and just keep fighting for it. The problem is, as you said, this is sort of, it's happening right now, it's going to be intensive, and we can't wait 20 years to sort of get the budget for this. It would have to happen right now. And so it's a very tough question. Just maybe, I mean, short of an entire movement rising up around the state right now, I don't see how it would happen. I would love to see it. I would love to see the entire state so fed up with just the funding climate that that the legislature just overrides Jindal's budget decisions. But I'm not exactly I don't see that happening in the future, unfortunately. So there's that. I mean, the only thing I can say is it stinks.
Well, this is away from the Louisiana Science Center, so sorry to take it off topic, but I was thinking all the way back to Matt's question about confusion, and now we talked about a lot of it's confusion about what evolution is, but I think that a huge part of it is also confusion about what the word theory means. I think that's something that's been so exploitated that needs to be focused on its own. Because I just Googled theory definition, and the first thing that even the dictionaries aren't telling anyone right. They say a supposition or a system of ideas intended to explain something, especially one that is based on general principles independent of what's being explained. It has nothing to do with the body of the scientific evidence and the systematic, upholding several hypotheses along with just, a whole stratum of experiments. Nothing. And I think that's one of the things that's been exploited so hard by creationism movement that it needs to be focused on specifically. Because it seems like if you teach kids first how to identify what a theory actually is, then even when they're taught other things that aren't science, they'll be able to recognize them hopefully more clearly.
Yeah, and that also goes back to the point, which is like if you teach kids creationism and don't teach them the scientific method, they're going to be confused because, again, a theory is the strongest thing in science. It's a well-supported explanation of the natural world backed by all the evidence we have. That's what a theory is. And so evolution is a theory, gravity is a theory, we have germ theory. And what you see is a lot of people go, well, the creationists, because I read a lot of creationist textbooks, and there's sort of there's this thing that I sort of think is the creation science method, where they don't have theory sort of the top of the scientific method, where you build, everything goes into a theory, and you have laws that are sort of the building blocks that are part of supporting it. The creationists have the theories, and then the theories become laws at an unspecified point where they become extra strong, sort of the creationists. It's this basic misunderstanding of how the scientific method works, because laws are really sort of simple facts, often mathematical equations, that build the rest of science. And they're not when a theory becomes strong. And so I was actually, in my piece I did on charters in Texas, the schools were teaching that one law that affects us now is the law of gravity. It was just like, I think they meant to say the theory of gravity, but they've completely mixed it up and said the law of gravity. It's like, it was one of those things where it's like, this isn't just evolution again. It's that in their way of thinking about science, even if it's sort of a harmless, I understand what they meant, but it's still completely wrong and sort of absurd to see it in a public school science textbook. And so that's sort of what happens when you don't teach evolution, when you don't follow the scientific method. And again, so the laws are just building blocks of theories, but a lot of people don't understand the definition of a scientific theory. And so again, it's something we re-explain to the legislature every year. What is a theory? What is a law? What is the scientific method? You can't just say evolution is only a theory because that you're talking about the strongest thing in science.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you for that question, or that comment, because it hadn't really been said, but it did need to be said.
So I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to put it in the form of a challenge. So the question I want to pursue here is, you've talked a lot about where you don't think religion should be taught in public schools. I'm kind of curious about where you think it should be taught. Now, the way I want to put it in terms of a challenge is an argument I heard from a friend that says sort of that the ideal would be that we don't draw these sharp lines between disciplines, that when we talk about biology, we think about ethics, and we think about philosophy, and we think about religion, and that the problems you point to are not problems with creationism, they're problems with bad teachers, poorly prepared teachers. And the evidence you had, right, about bad history and all that suggests the bigger problem. So that's a challenge.
In a way,